Now then, you're welcome, Max. So Cork in the 1940s, Kilkenny in the 2000s, and now Limerick have managed 4 in a row, and counting is the point of distinction there. Very much and counting is what it feels like, all as part of their 5 and 6 years. Reminder of the final scoreline yesterday: Kilkenny 215, Limerick 30 points. They were 3 down at half time, but 21 points in the second half, more than got the job done, a 9-point winning margin. Very happy to say David Herity is with us once again. Hey David.
How are you doing, Joe? How are you keeping?
Great, thanks. And Jamesie O'Connor as well. Hey Jamesie.
Joe, how's the form?
Very well. There was a moment, I don't know if you were at the game or watching on screen, but when the 30th point landed from distance and the game was still on, even John Kiely and Paul Kinnerk allowed themselves a high five and a hug, and a Kiely just saying well done. And I suspect they have plotted together for many, many hours. I half wondered as well, James, I wonder was 30 points a kind of a marker they had in their head, who knows. But either way, they more than deserve a high five and a well done, because this was just epic.
Yeah, some team, Joe, I suppose, with that ability and that attribute to be able to produce probably your best performance of the year on the biggest stage, and they've repeatedly done that in the All-Ireland finals. And the second half, and I suppose the second half of the second half was arguably their greatest ever performance. I mean, the dominance, the physicality, the power, the accuracy, the efficiency was off the charts. And I mean, to score 21 points in the second half of an All-Ireland final. They had one wide on the board, I think, on probably close to the 70th minute, and they had 2 more. Graham Mulcahy had kind of a shot over his shoulder on the sideline, and Gillandon had line ball where there wasn't a whole lot happening, so she looked at the game as in the bag anyway, I might as well have a go for it. But their efficiency was just incredible. And I mean, literally, Kilkenny just ran into a windmill in the second half. And look, credit to the Cats, the intensity they brought in the first half, the physicality, the work rate, but you just felt, look, this is just grist to Limerick's mill, and I just couldn't see Kilkenny being able to sustain it. And I think I suppose really, if you're talking about pivotal periods in the match, the move of Cian Lynch to centre forward before half time, to me, he was the guy that almost single-handedly turned things around, because he obviously got a couple of scores, got on ball, started to make things happen, and I thought he was back to the Lynch of old, orchestrating things, just his creativity, his flair, just his ability to suck in the defender and slip the pass. I thought he was phenomenal. He was my man of the match yesterday. But overall, just an unbelievable team performance. And the most distressing thing for the rest of us, Joe, is their age profile, all the soundings, the noises afterwards. They're not done, and they did it without Sean Finn, arguably their best inside defender. They did it without their captain Declan Hannon. Every minor 19, 20-year-old in Limerick will be bursting a gut now to get into the gym, to do whatever it takes to be a part of this. And they're clearly hungry for more, and at this point they're clearly, I'd say, the bookies' favourites for 5 and beyond. So incredible performance by Kiely and the management team. And that's the one thing he's done, Joe. He's assembled probably the best group of people in that backroom team. I mean, Paul Kinnerk is just a genius, we know that, but he went after him and got him. Obviously Caroline Curry, we know how highly she's touted that sports performance area. Alan Cunningham was a selector with Dalo, hugely respected in Clare hurling circles, just a quality guy. Angus O'Brien, another Clare man, principal in Broad for National School in East Clare, really good coach. Shawnee O'Donnell was with the Cork hurlers on stats. They went after him and got him when he was deemed surplus to requirements in Cork. Apparently he's phenomenal at what he does. And I'd say you go right through it, they're medical people. Everything is just first class in that setup. And obviously, with JP, they have a very generous benefactor as well. So the infrastructure is there, and Kiely has done a hell of a job stewarding it, but Kinnerk had those guys just absolutely primed yesterday. And his record now is just off the charts in terms of what he's done, and the success that he's been able to achieve.
David Jamesie's given us a pretty perfect overview there. What strikes you in the afterglow?
Sorry, Joe, say that again.
What strikes you in the immediate afterglow of their 4 in a row?
Yeah, it is frightening when you look at the age profile. Like Jamesy said there, I was just looking at it there today, and quickly run down through. There's Mike Casey, 28, Dan Morrissey, 30, Barry Nash is 27, Burns is 29, William O'Donoghue is 29, Hayes is 25, O'Donovan 28, Lynch 27, Hegarty 29, Reedy 30, Morrissey 27, Gillan 27, Flanagan 26. and Peter Casey 26. Like, how, even kind of looking back to the Kilkenny team of 2009, you had Derek Ling, who was 31, and you had Richie Hogan, who was 21. There was a good 10-year gap. There's four, there's arguably, if you took out Kyle Hayes there, there's about 3 years you can really span across the whole team. They've all come together, and they're all at their peak. And they're so dominant in what they do. They've all obviously come up with the same age profile, but like it's so rare to have a team that everyone is around the same span of 4 or 5 years. It's absolutely freak of nature. Now, I would say that possibly why Kilkenny were as good as they were is because when it's so spread out, if someone retires, you're only filling 1 or 2 gaps. Like, it is, I would think anyway, like the end of the Limerick team is going to happen within the next 5 years. Like, there's no way, obviously, all those lads will be, the majority of them will be gone and finished with. But it's just to get such a group of players together is incredible.
Yeah.
It is just a freak of nature. And you look back to 2018 again, having 13 lads that played in that 2018 final, 12 of them started that day and 12 of them started yesterday, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely bizarre. Like, even when Kilkenny were at their prime, and you look at the 8 titles that they won in the 10 years, they went through 4 goalkeepers during that time. Like, they went through a Derek Ling and a Cha Fitzpatrick to a Michael Rice and a Michael Fennelly. Like, they went from Tennyson to Brian Hogan to Kieran Joyce. Like, it just kept going on and on and on, where you're kind of going from a Goethe to even TJ started coming into it. You started bringing in your extra players there, your Colin Fennellys. Everyone just kept changing. The whole team was just a constant kind of conveyor belt coming through. But they have just loaded this belt with absolutely incredible players, and they're just there, and they're all around the same age. And so once again, they're going to be buzzing. The biggest achievement, I think, for Kylie is the fact that he has managed to keep them all buzzing and hungry throughout those whole years, but also then keeping a bench that's clearly there as well, that are playing little minor parts in this whole incredible run that they're on, and keeping them happy. That's probably the biggest achievement I think that he's had.
So by your maths there, another 5 years, 9 in a row is what we're saying.
Sorry, Joe, say it again.
Sorry, we might be having trouble with the line. I was doing your maths there. Another 5 years for this team, 9 in a row.
I would. The only thing is about Limerick again, they have to go back into the bear pit again, and that is the Munster Championship next year. And when you think about it, how kind of the sliding doors moments, like if Cork had beaten them that day, they were out of the championship. If Tipperary had beaten Waterford, they were out of the Munster final. So it's not as easy as saying, they'll go on and they'll win their 5 in a row and 6 in a row. And I know, again, John Kiley stopped one of the local reporters yesterday straight away after the match, and he just goes, enjoy where you're at, stop thinking about next year. But it is, in one way, it is kind of frightening where they can go to, but also it's such a competitive Munster Championship. I think if they are stopped, it will be by a Munster team. It will be a Cork Tip or a Clare. I think Kilkenny and Galway are still just a little bit off. That Kilkenny team is possibly will have to go through a bit of a rebuilding phase, and Derek Ling will have to actually heading into year 2. There will be a fair amount of changes, I would imagine, in the winter months, that he's going to have to refill and try and find a club level. And I wouldn't be the best person to know the in-depth knowledge of Kilkenny club hurling at the moment, because obviously focusing on Kildare for the last few years, but I wouldn't say there's as many standout players there that are going to easily fill the boots of a Wally Welsh and Conor Fogarty and TJ, Richie Hogan, these lads there too easily. So there's a bit of work to be done there in Kilkenny.
Jamesie, in terms of the actual game then, I feel, honestly, I could just copy and paste the exact questions I asked you two after the Galway game, and the exact same terminology and the analogy, which was of a heavyweight boxer, being Limerick, taking everything that the slightly lesser opponent could throw at him, taking a few knocks and shiving a few knocks, sure, but absorbing them, and then insert Kilkenny for Galway, just being a bit punched out, and Limerick only hitting their straps, and that's kind of the short story of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a simplified version of it, Joe, but yeah, I think it's, as you said, there's a lot of parallels with the Galway match. I mean, the conditions certainly didn't make it easy, and there was a strong, breeze that Kilkenny had the aid of in the first half. And looking down from our commentary position, Walter Walsh and Tom Field on the other side at times were back in their own 45, and it was a case of, right, we're going to we're going to make ourselves hard to break down here. And the two half forwards, worked. And Tom Phelan, I thought, had a fantastic game for Kilkenny. Worked incredibly hard in that first half. But I was thinking, listen, Burns gets the ball in that similar position in the second half with no one near him. It's over the bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was there was just that question. Could Kilkenny sustain it? Because, people probably don't appreciate the power of Tom Morrissey, the power of Hegarty. I mean, the body tackles that they put in, and it's those repeated hits that just continually sap your energy. And I don't think people maybe fully appreciate maybe just how draining it is. Tip this year after they played Limerick, almost emptied, incredibly flat next time out. And Galway, it just appeared with 20 minutes to go, were out on their feet again and couldn't live with it. And I thought some of the Kilkenny players, again, they just looked like Limerick had worn them down physically, because all these accumulated hits just eventually take their toll. And Will O'Donoghue took a card. I can't remember who he ploughed into late. I think Burns ran into Mikey Butler, again ploughed into him late. Hegarty might have taken a card for, again, a frontal charge. And they don't mind taking the card, but these hits, these are 6 feet 5 inch behemoths that are just built like, professional, Australian rules football players. I mean, just the power of them, and that relentless physicality that they bring. And that's not to in any way for a second, Joe, take anything away from their hurling, because the quality of their stick work, the accuracy of those passes, the ball is going to hand, and to do it in the conditions that were there yesterday, with a wet ball, balls flying off the stick. It's just a testament to the work that Connacht has done from a coaching perspective. I mean, again, there's so many improvements over the years. I mean, Limerick wouldn't have been seen as a dominant team in the air, but that's been coached into them. You look at Burns, you look at Hayes on the other side, you look at their full back line. They're all excellent now, as good as Kilkenny were in the air, maybe in their prime. So, and that's down to coaching, and obviously the style of play. I mean, everyone knows the way they're going to set up. The half forwards are going to come deep. There's going to be a two-man full forward line. There's going to be angle ball to Gillan and Flanagan inside, and yet, teams are still probably trying to figure out how to counteract it. And funnily enough, I mean, look, it would have been great from a Clare perspective to have been there yesterday. I'm not sure we'd have coped with what they brought.
Yeah.
But Clare seem to be the one team that just, whatever it is, whether it's just look at the knowledge that these guys were in college together, or whether it's just our strength and conditioning, whether it's the type of athlete maybe that we have, but we just seem to match up as well as anybody in the country with them. But Kilkenny just couldn't seem to stay with them, Joe. And I obviously, that said, there were turning points in the game, but I mean, they just ground them down and wore them down, and Kilkenny just couldn't stay with them in that last quarter.
David, did you feel Kilkenny were going to struggle to sustain what they were doing? I think you both felt Galway were never going to be able to keep up what they were doing against Limerick. Did you have the same sense watching yesterday of Kilkenny?
I thought one of the biggest turning points happened before the match when Blanchfield wasn't starting. The big thing that Kilkenny have had over the last two matches, in Leinster final and semi-final, is Big Wally comes onto the field as a fair old roar because he's a crowd favourite. Get a big boost out of that. You get a big boost when Park Welsh comes on, and Richie Hogan comes on, and Killy Buckley comes on, and you empty the bench there. But yesterday they used up one of those lifelines straight away where Wally Welsh started the game, so that boost is gone immediately, and Wally was enforcing a few of his shots. And then they brought on Park Welsh at half time. And sometimes bringing on someone at half time when you're looking for a lift is not the best, because they just come out onto the field and they're straight away in. You're waiting for this big announcement, or them kind of warming up at the sideline, and everyone's getting a bit of a buzz. Right, here comes Park Welsh now. I found it unusual that Alan Murphy was the next sub on. He hadn't appeared in the semi-final and the Leinster final, as far as I remember, and yet he was third on. I felt they left kind of Richie Hogan. The game was well and truly gone, and I'd said that to you last week, that they had to make sure that they were in the game by the time they emptied the bench. By the time they did empty the bench, bring on Kilkenny and Richie, there was 6-7 points in it, and then it was game over. Limerick were up. They were flying it where they were at. I thought Kyle, I love listening to some of the the interviews after matches, and unfortunately, when you do turn up, you don't tend to get them or hear them anyway. But listening back to him on the phone there last night, there's a lot of drivel that's said after matches, but every so often somebody comes out with a few little nuggets there that you can take. And I felt at the semi-final stage, Darragh Donovan and Kylie both came out one after another and mentioned Éanna Murphy's puckouts and how good he was on his puckouts. Now, you don't mention a real strength. Normally they come out with, the other team are very good and they're always hitting on their hearts. But they went really after Éanna Murphy's puckouts, and they kind of went, he's so deceptive in what he's doing. He's hitting those mid-range puckouts that are incredibly difficult to actually to stop. Now, they're extremely risky, but he's a very brave keeper in the way that he was in that first half against Galway. And that's why Galway were to the forefront, because they didn't know whether to push up in the midfield, hang back like they normally do. There was little pockets there, and Éanna Murphy was able to dissect that Limerick team. I felt yesterday Kilkenny, they went with a few early puckouts there, and obviously they were blown and they had to be retaken. But in the second half, like Jamesie said, when they're beaten down, I looked at one stage, it was about the 58th minute, Owen had the ball and 6 out of the 9 lads in front of him had their backs turned to him. They were physically absolutely goosed the whole thing. Yeah. And if you look back, and I was kind of just keeping note of the puckouts, Owen only hit one mid-range puckout and lost that. There didn't seem to be that kind of someone coming deep in around. When I'm talking about mid-range, I'm talking between the 50, they're your own 50 and the far 65. They needed a few pocket puckouts there, where then if they get it, they were able to drive it and give it and keep supplying the likes of Owen Cody inside, which they just didn't have. They kept going short. And then, sure, inevitably, then they'd go short and then end up pucking it down on top of the 6'4", 6'4", and 6'6" half back line, which was just ridiculous. And then obviously it was like pucking at the gable end of a wall. Like this ball just kept coming back then, and Limerick were completely on top. Yeah,
I think it was Peter Casey in his post-match interview mentioned puckouts being talked about at half-time as well. So again, similar vibe to the Galway game.
And just another thing on his interview, which I thought was very good, was the fact that he keeps going on about reference points and self-reference points to Limerick. You remember when Johnny Sexton had that, when he obviously had that incredible comeback with Leinster in the Heineken Cup final all those years ago, and he was talking about Liverpool and Istanbul and so on. But they don't reference any other sports. They reference themselves. They goes, we've enough reference points now at this stage, this team does, from different games where we've been behind or things are going wrong that we can go back to. They're so confident in their own ability and what they've done and in different games that they just have a library of those kind of performances and those turning points that they've been down by 3 points. Like someone came out with a stat there, was online saying that they haven't won 2 halves this year in championship, which is another incredible thing.
Yeah, well, there's a thing we'll get to in a few minutes just about this trend in Limerick games. I mean, the only game this entire championship season where they've been ahead at half time was the first game out against Clare. Otherwise they've been behind in every single game and obviously won all those games, which is a really mad kind of trend when you think of what a great team they are. But just Jamesie, a last word on Kilkenny. You talked there about a few game-defining moments, and I suppose what's emerged this season, and look, next year it could be different, and 2 years ago Limerick were different, but this year, when you're having that kind of I guess purple patch against Limerick, or that period where you're throwing everything at them and you're creating chances, you now have to take them. You almost have to build up an almost unassailable lead. And Kilkenny did lots of great things, and they were, they were really expressing themselves. Like I at one stage, Owen Cody, surrounded by 4 or 5 Limerick Giants chasing after him, bounced the ball off the ground with the hurl and then the dummy pass. I mean, you're thinking, this guy's really firing, and he scored a goal, and lots of things were going Kilkenny's way, but they just didn't build up enough of a lead. 6 points is just not enough of a lead when you're emptying yourself against Limerick.
Yeah, and 6 points would have been probably a fair reflection of the way they'd hurled in the first half, and they had done a lot of things right. They had turned Limerick over. They had really worked their socks off in the middle third. But as I said, Lynch, the centre forward, just for me, you just really got a grip on things there. And 3 points, especially with the wind, you felt wasn't an accurate reflection at half time. I suppose, Joe, in terms of Limerick I think had 4 wides at half time. Kilkenny had 5. TJ missed a free that you don't normally expect to see, but it wasn't an easy day for free takers, and he nailed a longer one just after that. He won from play. Tom Phelan had won from play. Wally had won from play. There were probably chances that they needed to take, but it wasn't like that they had a dozen wides on the board in the first half. I mean, Kilkenny still had, I think it was 9 wides in total.
Yeah, this wasn't Clare in the Munster final.
No, absolutely not. And as I said, the thing was, and David alluded to it, like they couldn't get any decent ball into Mossy and Cody in that second half. I mean, they were starved of possession, and yet, Joe, there were little things in the game. I mean, Cody, that second goal chance, the one that he flashed, just it was a narrow angle, but he was in close enough inside the 21 or the 14 to maybe take it on, and I suppose he showed the mindset. I mean, he took the first goal that he got brilliantly, but like it wasn't far away from the bottom, the bottom right hand corner. So that could have gone in. There was a ball in the second half that TJ I think popped into Mossy or Cody. I can't remember which one there was. He slipped. Just he was about to take it down. He was in behind. That was maybe again a half goal chance. And then I think when there was there maybe 2 points in it or maybe a point in it? There was a 65 that was one of those marginal calls that probably came off a Limerick defender's leg. Barry Nash went to pull on it. He was hooked. It went out. It was waved wide, but technically the last touch on it was probably from a Limerick man. And I think Limerick, Hegarty maybe got a point from the puck out, and you kind of had a 2-point swing there where, if they get the 65 and TJ nails it, Kilkenny are either level or maybe even they're a point ahead. So, like, look at they're small. Little things that can.
Your point is almost every single little thing needs to go for you. Everything. And that's, listen, and do I think that would have changed the outcome in any way, shape or form? Absolutely not. Okay. I still think Limerick would want to win the game. It just mightn't have been as comfortable as it was. But credit to Kilkenny. I mean, there was still only 2 points in it, I think, with 10 minutes to go. Yeah. But I mean, it was like trying to plug, you know what I mean, a major breach in the wall with your finger. I mean, the dam was eventually going to burst, and when it did with a vengeance. David, as a final one before we go to break, was there anything Kilkenny could have done in that second half when Limerick were on a rampage? Did somebody need to lose a contact lens, or is that not really going to address? Ultimately, you're doomed either way, but could Kilkenny have done more in that period?
No, I agree with you. That's kind of was saying that afterwards, that you need to kill the tempo and the speed of the game with Limerick. Nobody's going to match them physically, or very few people are going to. And same with Galway and Kilkenny there the last day. They end up running out of steam. You need to try and play it on your own terms. Now, it's a catch-22 situation. If you try and kill the puck outs and try and kill the sidelines and bring it right down, kill the whole game, free taking, well, then you're playing into their hands, especially on puckets, because they're able to set up then, and then you can't get away your quick fire ball and try and get it over their wall. But at the same time, you have to try and knock that 75-minute game down as close as you can, or to 35 minutes into the amount of time that the ball is in. Because again, you are, like we've said there, you're hitting the mountains that they have. They should have tried to kill it, especially when Kilkenny and Paddy Deegan got that goal and Kilkenny went 5 points up. But then to concede 5 points in a row, somebody has to go down at that stage and try and make sure that this game is just done and dusted for a few minutes. But in fairness, the ref was brilliant. He was on top of that. Limerick tried to do it a few times and he was play on. He was very much on top of what exactly was going on. He's clear as well. Even Peter Casey, a few times, he did what he did in the semi-final, kind of trying to hold on the hurl. But the referee was very intelligent. He clearly looked back. He knew his players, and he knew exactly their little traits then of when to give a free, when not to. I tell you, it's brilliant. But those 3 chances, I do think Kilkenny and Galway and Clare will all look back to the 30-minute, between 30 and 31 minutes in the last 3 games when Mark Rogers' shot was saved by Nicky Quaid to make them go in at 6 points at half time, when Concannon could have put them 8 points ahead, and when Owen Cody's goal could have put them 6 up at half time there yesterday.
Very welcome back. David Herity and Jamesie O'Connor with us, chatting through Limerick's brilliance, frankly, and to that point, fellas, about Limerick coming back, and it's been a habit all season, really. As I mentioned, I saw Michael Verney made the point. They were 3 up against Clare at half-time early in the Munster Championship, but otherwise, in the 5 games since, Limerick have been behind at half-time, and it was amazing, even on the TV coverage yesterday. And I'm sure there were Galway players still with PTSD watching, going, 3-point gap, not enough. And even on the TV, there's this sense of, okay, everyone, here we go. It's the third quarter. And a part of me is watching saying, like, sport doesn't work like that. You can't, it's not like, they just turn it on for a third quarter and then, of course, we know what happened. I can't really get my head around this in some ways. So I take the point, David, we're saying that teams throw everything at Limerick, and Limerick invariably, they are human, so they do ship a few blows. But, like, this can't be a deliberate thing that a team sets out to do, to kind of, Asher will go steady as she goes, and then we'll score a few before half time, and then third quarter we'll kill them. It's really striking and strange the way this keeps happening to Limerick.
Yeah, but again, it comes down to you having the best coaches and the best analysis. We've said already that they have the best management team that are out there. This year, anyway, they have. I'm sure there's other teams plotting and planning at the moment. But again, when you come in, if you're 3 points up, well, do you change what you're doing? Because if you change what you're doing and you're 3 points up, you're in that kind of little bit of a dilemma then, where you're like, well, we can't mess about it too much. Like, people were a little bit critical of Henry just before in the 30th minute when he went one up front. And you could clearly see it on TV that he was pointing, just leave Conor Whelan up front.
Yeah.
And then get sat back. And then Limerick came at them and ended up scoring 6 points then just before half time. So you come in at half time, and it's again, do you stick at what you're doing or do you change it up? Whereas Limerick, when you come in at half time, they can actually see where things are going wrong.
I totally take that point, right? But this is just me being a bit kind of overly critical of this great Limerick side, which is a churlish thing to do. Like, why not start the game well? Why not have your homework done so well that you start well? Why? Because everybody is like lauding Limerick for this aspect, and I think there's a degree of scoreboard journalism about it, because I guarantee you, and you've mentioned the examples quite rightly, David, there have been a couple of times here where Limerick have been 5, 6, 7 points down in games, and actually if the next score was a goal, then Limerick are in big trouble. Like, Limerick were not in, as well as they won yesterday, Limerick were not in control of that situation, and a Kilkenny goal at 6 down, then you got a really steep hill. So I just think that, again, I guarantee you, if they'd lost that game, we'd be reading all pieces today saying things like, this has been coming, this Limerick team, sloppy starts, they got to sort something, what are they doing, why aren't they starting games well? Like, it is a curious aspect for such a great team.
Do you know, that's the first Limerick game I've been at all year, and maybe again just what Kylie had said afterwards, he said we were playing against a very strong breeze. So again, we're not out in the field, so we don't know how strong it is, and he goes, we knew we had to soak up a lot of this pressure.
Right. So
you're seeing them down with 3 points at half time, and you're like, was there a strong breeze against Galway that they were playing against the breeze? Was there, James, you probably know, did they play against a strong breeze against Clare in the Munster final? Maybe it's a thing with them that they just know themselves, lads, we're playing against a strong breeze, we know what's going to happen, they're going to try and throw everything at us, we just need to batten down the hatches, try and work it through the lines. And but again, just small little things as well where they deserve massive credit is the fact that they were going short in that first half and losing a large percentage of their puckouts until just before half time. Cian Lynch got on a few frees and just won a few frees. They went through it and they went short with it. But I don't think they're intentionally going out to not play well. Just at times, like when Owen Murphy stuck over the free yesterday, it was only then you kind of realised. And then obviously when Limerick started shooting from everywhere, the ball was going over, you're like, Jesus, there's a serious breeze out here on the field, and we wouldn't have appreciated it up in stand. So I don't know, maybe Jamesy, did they play against a strong breeze in that first half against Clare as well? Maybe that might answer the question as to why they're not dominating for the full 70 odd minutes.
Yeah, so there's two things just to come in there, Joe. Like, number one, Christie threw me a stat, I don't know, was it last night or whatever, that I think Limerick have outscored the opposition by 23 points in the third quarter over the championship. Yeah. So obviously the third quarter is their championship minutes, and they've maybe targeted that. I think the second thing on that, again, is just what David alluded to, is like teams have thrown different things at them. I mean, Joe, you take for example Barry Nash, the year he had last year, and clearly from early on teams have decided, right, whatever else, Barry Nash ain't going to be getting the puck out anyway, so like we'll be taking him out and stopping him getting forward. There'll be somebody just check his runs and make sure he's not galloping into the opposition half of the field. So that was one thing they had to deal with. Gillane, I think it was against Waterford, rather than a conventional sweeper that stands maybe on the edge of the D, and whether it's Will O'Donoghue or Darragh O'Donovan, they're going to ping it, we'll say left to right, and depending on Gillane's move, whatever. Like I think Waterford maybe stationed somebody, a sweeper, maybe on the right hand side, and just they were taking away that half of the field, and that meant then that Conor Prunty, whoever was on Gillane, stands on Gillane's left hand side, and you know what I mean. So all these things were maybe thrown at them by different teams. Yeah. But it just shows again, obviously their data analysis at half time, that they're able to make these little tweaks and little adjustments to correct maybe or just work around and say what the opposition is throwing at them, and that's probably an element of it as well.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Is that a high wire act? Like, should Limerick not throw something at teams that they're not expecting? Because at the moment it seems to be, we're the king, you know what we're going to do, so you throw your little curveball at us, we'll deal with it, and then we'll win. Whereas maybe they should be saying, you didn't expect that from us. Maybe they're too good, they don't need to.
Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Joe. I mean, and like, this is the thing. This is their strength. I mean, everybody knows the way they're going to play. I mean, two on top, half forwards coming.
For me, that's not for me in a way. That's not a strength, and that's why, like, at 42 minutes, they're 5 points down. And geez, if Kilkenny score the next goal, it's scary stuff. I wonder, like, is that the next step for the team to throw something different at others from the first minute?
But their ability, Joe, to, like, their trust in the system. You know what I mean? And then and it's clearly been shown. Like, it doesn't matter then who's missing. Doesn't matter. Plug the next guy in, the next man up, and the next guy fits into the system and does and trusts what they've been doing in training, on the training pitch, the skill level, the accuracy, the timing of the passes, the movement off the ball, the delivery to the inside forwards. I mean, like, this is high wire stuff in terms of the skill level that they're executing at. I mean, those balls to Gillan that Darragh O'Donovan hits, where it's one bounce, those puck-outs that Nicky Quaid hits. I mean, Kyle Hayes took off up the line under the Cusack stand at one point in the second half, and Nicky straight away sees it's on, drops it 5 yards in front of him. I think he slipped, was the only reason maybe he didn't get the clean pick and maybe get away. And I think he might have been fouled, or I think it maybe ended up in a score. But, like, Quaid's ability just to hit these guys in stride with the puck out, like, we don't probably appreciate, Joe, just how difficult it is or just how good it is. And I think, like, they're just executing at a phenomenal level. And, like, that level of accuracy, as I said yesterday, like, I know you'll hear different stats, but in the second half, from my records, like, I think they were 84%. In terms of, they got 25 shots. I think they dropped one short. They had 3 wides, 2 of which were in garbage time, but it shot 21 points. I mean, under the greatest pressure, like on All-Ireland final day, that's phenomenal. And like, we can talk about their physicality and we can talk about their power, but look at the quality of their stick work, their hurling, how easy they make it look, Joe. I mean, like, lots of club teams are maybe trying to play like Limerick do, but it takes incredible skill, and obviously, look at it's been drilled over years on the training ground, but it's just second nature to them, and it's second nature to whoever comes in off the bench, whether that's an injury, whether it's someone not playing well, whether it's just getting the guy on form in, and the juggernaut rolls on.
It does. David, you were coming in there as well on my quibbles.
Just on, you were kind of saying they never throw anything different out. You remember the time they were going with Kyle Hayes in the half forward, and all of a sudden he's half back. Like, they do. Will have done it with midfield. He was centre back there the last day. Very few people would have put him in there. Like, they do make little subtle changes, but it's a strength within the team. If you're going along and obviously if you're so confident in the group, like we said there, and all the reference points back, you don't kind of change a winning team, or you don't start saying, lads, they're going to do this and we're going to change up our whole game plan here just because of the team. That completely undermines all the psychology behind the whole team. Then straight away, like, at the end of the day, they've won every game bar 1 or bar 2 in the last 6 years.
No, totally.
It is frightening. And again, you asked why in the third quarter they're so good, because they have the cheat sheets then, because they have their KPIs at halftime where they come in and they go, right, our tackle count should be this. Everyone has their tackle count should be at a certain level, whatever that might be, or it might be their shot, the number of chances, there might be their shot efficiency, it might be their turnovers, whatever it is. And then you come in, you're going to go, lads, we're way down here, and here, or way up here. And, like, again, they're such an intelligent team. Going back to John Kiley's interview, he goes, when we came in at half time, he goes, Connacht is a genius at what he does, but he goes, the players had the answers. And again, when you have a team that's there, and it's the same team for the last 6 years, they know exactly when they're not playing well, and when they're not playing well, when they're not winning the breaks on puck-outs, and how they actually change up these things. So that's why having a team that's bloody pretty much been glued together for 6 years is such an achievement.
Right. Yeah, no, listen, I get it all. Yeah, John Giles, though, would say if it's right to do it in the 36th minute, it should be right to do it in the first minute. That's all I'm saying. As a final riposte, I'm quoting Giles here. There's no higher authority.
Just one other thing, Joe. I mean, even from look at the management perspective. I mean, Seamus Flanagan, was off form yesterday. Didn't have one of his best days. But Peter Casey has nailed 2 unbelievable scores from the sideline. So right, okay, he's got his shooting boots on. Let's get him close to goal. And there's a conversation there between Mikey Butler and Tommy Walsh. Do I stay with him or do you pick him up? And that's what happened. Tommy Walsh, said, right, I'll take the inside guy, and suddenly there's 2 angle balls to Casey. Tommy Walsh couldn't do a whole lot about it. I mean, he kept him practically corralled to the sideline. Casey nails the 2 of them. Tommy Walsh is whipped off. Mikey Butler goes back in. Casey gets another angle ball, gets another score, and just like that, is 3 points on the board from that move as well, where they recognised that Casey was capable of doing more damage inside, closer to goal. So look, they get so many calls right, and that's not by accident either.
Yeah, and look, if anyone.
Sorry, Joe, just on what you were saying, I was just thinking, like, it's like a boxer knocking a lad out in the 9th round, and you're kind of going, but why didn't you do it in the first? Like, why didn't you just, they have to soak up the pressure. Everyone is at their max, their best in that first 35 minutes, and it's the 2 of them are going hell for leather at each other, and Kilkenny are so dominant in what they're doing and so physical, and it's the fact that they have such conditioning. And it's built up from a long period of time. Yeah. And these lads have come through the ranks, and there's been a proper system that's put in place. I don't know whether it was back when kind of Anthony Daly had started it back there 12 plus years ago, and all of a sudden now they have that condition. So they're never going to race away from a team in the first half. It is, again, it's just both teams are coming out with their own style of play. Limerick are playing the way that they're playing, but it's just the fact that they soak up all that pressure, soak it all up, and then the second half teams just cannot live with them when they. Yeah,
totally agree. To be fair, because this might sound like I'm being critical of Limerick, I'm not. I'm just curious about the third quarter being targeted and like almost as if it's this preordained thing. And I don't think any team would set out for life to be that way, because you do run the risk of not being able to have a good third quarter or get back into it. My sense of it is, Dave, is exactly what you're saying. The other team throw the kitchen sink at them, they absorb it, and then come the third quarter, they begin to wrestle back control. But I just refuse to believe. I don't know. Have you played on teams where you said we'll target the third quarter? That's what's being said about Limerick now. I just don't believe a team goes out and targets a one quarter over another.
No, but I vividly remember being in the 2011 final. It was my first final, being in the dressing room. We're up by 4 points against Tipperary at half time, and actually smiling to myself going, we're going to win. Like, as in we basically won. Yeah. I remember just thinking, nobody beats us in the second half. Like, once we're up at half time, we're up by 4, nobody beats us. I remember smiling to myself, and everyone was so bloody calm what they're at, or even being down by a point. And then lads would just come in, and again the same thing was said, going, we haven't begun yet, we haven't started yet, lads, we're just going to go out and blitz them. And it was literally was as simple as a message as that, as kind of, look around, is anyone tired? No, let's go out and kill them, basically. Yeah. And it was so confident in the dressing room, and you can probably feel the same thing that Limerick are feeling. It's the exact same thing that it was in the Kilkenny dressing room back then. That it just you basically just knew that once you upped your standards again, nobody would be able to live with you. And that went back to the Kilkenny training sessions. And again, it's probably going back to again the Limerick sessions there at the moment, when they have such a phenomenal 30 players that they're able to they know they have it in the bank. But sure, they come in at half time, they're just like, again, is anyone exhausted? No. Sure, they're looking at their GPS as well and understand that there's so much left, and that all that information has been fed to them as well. That Jesus, you are basically only tipping the tip of the iceberg here. It's time to kick it on.
Yes. No, I dare say you're right. A point you sort of alluded to, Jamesie, but just to emphasise it again, like if you take an extreme example, Kerry's reliance on David Clifford, in terms of All-Ireland winning teams, it's quite pronounced with respect to lots of other very, very good Kerry players. I mean, it's really hard to think of an All-Ireland winning team where the workload is so spread out on any given day. As you mentioned, Galan is having that tussle with Lawler. Gearóid Hegarty has had stunning All-Ireland finals. He didn't have a stunning one yesterday by his standards. And as you said, it's no problem. Peter Casey, in you come. Cathal O'Neill off the bench, 2 points, no problem. And then Cian Lynch after 18 horrible months. Well, now you're going to weigh in with probably a man of the match performance in many people's eyes. Like, there's just there's not actually a weak point in that first 20, is there?
No, and that was the one thing maybe coming into the game that, Richie English obviously suffered an injury, and obviously with Sean Finn and Hannon gone, that they seem to be thin on cover at the back. They had plenty of guys, up front. Obviously Cathal O'Neill and Conor Boylan and Graham Mulcahy, and Adam English was there as well. Really good young players. So they had depth, maybe not as much depth as previous years. But yeah, it's just the overall quality and calibre of players that they've got. I thought Dan Morrissey had an unbelievable year for them, Joe, because early on, when obviously Herity wasn't firing, and maybe even in the early stages of the championship, like Gillane, obviously the Munster final, the Cork game, the Munster final, and I saw a good bit of Limerick this year, up close. Yeah. Was a number of their games. The Cork game for me was a change where, right, the half forwards are coming deeper than they've ever come. I mean, it was literally, right, we're going to lock the shop at the other end. There'll be no 30 points hit against us, and it was nearly as if we're going to pin it more on Gillane, because you're going to have more space than ever, Aaron. Okay, and it's up to us to make sure we get the right ball into you. But yeah, I mean, it's in the earlier matches, I thought their defence and their full back line in particular, and Nicky behind them, kept them in it. And to me, Dan Morrissey was an absolute rock on the edge of the square all year, and Mike Casey, obviously, and Barry Nash. We're really solid defensively. Barry didn't have the type of year he had last year, where he was, obviously in the hurler of the year conversation and galloping forward and getting points and goals and all kinds of things. But like defensively, it's hard to remember him putting a foot wrong all year. And Mike Casey obviously was rock solid, beside him. So, like, knowing as well that you have that solid base, and then obviously, the luxury of having players like Burns and Kyle Hayes on the wings. I mean, the size of them, the physicality they bring, the hurling that they have, and obviously the athleticism that Hayes gives you, and he was galloping forward again yesterday, breaking tackles, and so look, they're so well balanced. And for me, the big thing in Croke Park has been the return of Cian Lynch. This is hurler of the year, Cian Lynch, in terms of the influence that he had, because Dahi Burke had a big first half in that Ireland semi-final for Galway. David Reedy was completely anonymous. I thought Dahi hit a lot of ball, was dominant, and Cian Lynch went to centre forward in the second half and took him out of the game effectively. And again, he's stitching the play together. He sees little passes, just creating space for other guys. Some of it goes unseen by other people, but I think hurling people realise how good some of the things that Cian Lynch did yesterday were, and in that Galway match. And he looked again like he had that buzz, that energy, that vibrancy. He wasn't worrying about his hamstrings, wasn't worrying about his fitness. He looked like, again, he got really strong, and he played with the kind of a calm self-assurance that the great players have yesterday. And and I mean, it's like getting a new tie back, having him back in that kind of form. And obviously Gillane, Hugh Lawler matches up as well as anybody does with him, and Hugh was had a really good game yesterday, and Gillane was always going to struggle on such a good player. But Gillane didn't need to have a day yesterday for Limerick to win, and that's the luxury that they have, that it's not like we hold TJ and we hold Owen Cody and that's it, job done, because the rest of them aren't going to be good enough to put enough scores on the board to beat us. Limerick, Burns 8 points, one from play, but I mean, everyone does frees from distance is just arrowing through the wind, or hitting the top of the net and behind the goal, and they're not deviating, and each one of those is like a dagger to the opposition.
There's not really a weapon they don't have. David, feel free to say, well, how the hell am I supposed to answer that? But who is the greatest hurling team of your lifetime?
Yeah, we had this discussion afterwards. I actually asked JJ Laney, he goes, would they be better than the 2006, 2009 team? And he kind of goes, well, whatever happens, don't ever admit to it. So I won't, just out of respect to him. I think they have a bit, like I said earlier on in my answer, they have probably the best 15 hurlers that have come along ever. I don't know how you would disagree with that. The thing with the Kilkenny side of thing was there was so many changes. Like, that was the brilliance of what Brian Cody was doing, because there was a constant change up in the team and the personnel. And like I spoke to you there earlier on about all the different cornerbacks changing and the goalkeepers changing, the centre back and the midfield pairings changing. But this Limerick team, it hasn't changed. So if you were to put them up against, like, the hardest thing with the Kilkenny side of thing would be, who'd you actually put full back? Like, who'd you put centre back? Because there was so many, do you put John Tennyson the centre back or Brian Hogan the centre back? Yeah. There was so many different little changes within that Kilkenny team. I think this Limerick team, for actually keeping them together, is pretty bloody phenomenal. Yeah. Look, at all it is it's 1 year away from it being without question. Yeah. Right now, you can still have a good argument in the pub if you want, but next year, if they win the 5 in a row, it's pretty much job done.
And 2 points, Joe. Just to,
hang on. I want to follow up there. Kilkenny on their best day. naturally enough, with David Herity in the goals. Kilkenny on their best day against this Limerick team. Who wins that one-off match?
The hurling has changed. It's completely changed. Like if we were hurling back then, I'd be pucking. If I had 30 balls, I'd puck 29 and a half of them down the top. Like that was the game plan. The game plan was said to me, would be you'd be in the dressing room and go, if you want to hit it short, go long. That was one of the things that was said before, one of the key matches. In other words, why? Just like, if our team is not good enough to win the ball at half forward line, well, then I've picked the wrong team here.
Okay.
Like, so you go long, and if you want to change it up, you can go longer. It's very simple. So, like, trying to hit the ball down top of those lads day in, day out, with Larks, probably Henry and TJ there underneath them, lads in their prime, it'll be a fair old battle to see them. And then Eddie Brennan inside, or Richie Power, Richie Hogan, Taggy. Jesus, it's not a bad old bunch. You'd love to see them. Jesus, yeah, I would think the game has changed. No, if you look back in the backs, I've seen Laker Gales there, and there was one on Noel Hickey, and he was just going up, he'd stick up a hand, he'd get, and he'd drive it. Like, there wasn't a hand pass. I'd love to know how many hand passes we managed to hit together. It was get it and lump it, and the boys down there will win it, and that's the way it is. Nowadays, we'd lose. Christ, our possession would be through the floor, really, to be honest with you.
Look, it's a dreadfully cheap question, and the same problem emerges when you try to compare the Man City treble-winning team with the United treble-winning team. Like, the sport is actually incomparable. But Jamesie, you were coming in there with 2 points, which has me excited.
I'll park them, Joe. I suppose, listen, I mean, again, look at that Kilkenny team had, as the players themselves would probably say, look at, JJ, Tommy Walsh, Henry were probably 3, generational players. I mean, JJ was probably the greatest pure defender I think I've ever seen. Phenomenal player, and obviously Tommy was Tommy, and Henry, and so on. So it's probably unfair to either teams. I mean, you could argue, and again, that's not to cast any aspersions on the current Kilkenny team, but how many of those guys would get into that Kilkenny team? And that's not been unfair, because as David said, the game has changed. It's so different now in so many respects. But yeah, you'd love to figure out some way to get it on, wouldn't you?
So what for all those misgivings and complications, give me the best hurling team you've seen.
Well, I mean, listen, like, because I suppose I hurled against them, that Kilkenny team in their prime and in their pomp were phenomenal. I think probably maybe as individuals, you'd maybe say that Kilkenny maybe had more individuals in terms of brilliance and so on, but in terms of system, I mean, as I said, just Limerick doing what they do.
Yeah.
So it's an impossible one to answer, Joe. I think, I mean, this Limerick team, if they do 5 in a row, I mean, they've already done 5 in 6 years. If they do 5 in a row or add to it, well, then again, maybe that brooks no argument. And one thing I think you can question is that the path this Limerick team have had to come through is probably significantly tougher than what that Kilkenny team had to endure. And that's not to say that they wouldn't have beaten the tar out of the rest of us that were there at the time as well. But certainly the adversity that this Limerick group have faced this year, and Joe, like, you think back to it, right? I mean, that game against Tipperary, I mean, the game was level at Ennis heading into stoppage time. If Cork had won by a point and Limerick had held on and beaten Limerick, or Tip had held on and beaten Limerick by a point, Limerick were gone. Crazy.
I know.
The margins were that small, and like if Tip had maybe taken care of business against Waterford, Limerick then are having to maybe play Galway in a quarter final, then there's a semi-final, then there's a final. There's no month off to recharge the batteries, get everybody fit and so on, and maybe then it's a different outcome. But maybe they got that bit of luck, but no one could say that this was a lucky All-Ireland. I mean, this was some All-Ireland, considering that losing Sean Finn, losing Hannon, it's probably their greatest, and certainly the form they showed in Croke Park, they were like a team just re-energised, that were back on their stage, where they play best. And I mean, what a way to confirm that Munster is our strongest hurling province, Joseph. The way they put pay to the Leinster boys. Yeah. And I'm a bit cheeky there, but I think, certainly, like, Munster been as competitive as it is, you certainly are battle hardened by the time you get to Croke Park. Yeah.
You're battle hardened, or then you're shattered if you lose. I mean, we can always be wise after the events, I suppose. It is an impossible question. I appreciate that. Who is your hurler of the year then, David?
I'd say it's Aaron Gillan. I thought it was a bit of a left field one there for the lads last night, saying Kyle Hayes at Iron Galan, especially when they, like even yesterday, I know he scored 2 points from play. 2 points from play is not bad going in an All-Ireland final, all the same. He got fouled for a free then as well. He still had an assist. I had him down for gave away a free. He had a point. He had two wides. He had an assist there in the first half to Cian Lynch and got him on the score sheet. Then he had a point in the second half. He won a free and he had another wide. Then Jesus, he's still got on a lot of ball for an inside forward. He's dragged him through a lot of those Munster games. And for me, he was the standout player of the year. I know obviously Kyle Hayes was outstanding. Dermot Burns then had a late run for it. But for me, Galan still is that slight bit ahead of the rest of the lads.
Yeah.
I thought Hugh Lawler, though, I thought Hugh Lawler was absolutely phenomenal. I think, it was kind of a bit of, even afterwards, were again injuries and the group of Kilkenny lads was happy to be there. JJ Brent Hogan, Richie Power. There was those kind of moments of, when you're standing around and there's like 10 seconds of silence where you don't know, you don't know what to say. Are Limerick just brilliant, or Kilkenny, what the hell happened? Basically, you're just kind of in a bit of shock, like. But I think when it kind of settles down and you kind of look back at it, there are still a lot of positive shoots there for Kilkenny. The fact that Derek Lyng has done his first year now, that whole era has now run in. He's got his first trophy. The likes of Hugh Lawler, the lads, Mikey Butler probably get himself another All-Star. You as well. The likes of Adrian Mullen was back. It was just very unfortunate. Tom Field had a very good year. Owen Cody was taken off in the 50th minute last year, but this year it looked like he was nearly player of the year. So there are some decent positive signs there for Kilkenny. It's just it'll be a very interesting few months now ahead, though.
Yeah. Will TJ go again, do you think?
I think he will, simply because Pat Horgan's going to go ahead and go again. He's 15 points ahead on the all-time list. If I was talking to him in the morning, I'd say he'd be stupid not to. Why would you give up knowing that if you retire now, you're going to be number 2 for possibly the next 20 years until someone else takes the job? I wouldn't. I'd have him. He's put him on ice. Derek Lyng should be making sure of that. The unfortunate thing for TJ is that he's probably going to go all the way to another club all Ireland for God knows how many years in a row. That's the killer thing. He doesn't get really a downtime.
Yeah.
Goes all the way, wins Kilkenny, wins Leinster, or gets to an All Ireland club final. But Derek Lyng managed him very well this year. He gave him his 3 months off and then brought him back in for the Leinster Championship. I still would. I'd still have him there for those crucial games, even if there was to bring them on. I definitely wouldn't see any other reason. He lives in the gym. That's his business, is working in the gym. So it's not like it's not like he's a farmer or it's a demanding job on him, or he's sitting in the car all day doing sales. Working in a gym, he can look after himself. There's no way there'll be too many other lads going. Derek Lyng will manage him, but definitely the whole allure of losing out on the all-time score by a few points at the end of the year because Horgan is staying on, I definitely don't think he will. I don't think he'll retire.
I do picture TJ Reid, like every time he gets up, like to get a glass of water or go to the toilet, he does a few bench press reps on the way. Like, is that his life? he is look, he's a different breed. I've said this before in the past. It's just he lives in his own world, and that's where he's at. And again, I remember saying that in 11 semi-final, we were playing Waterford and meeting him in the gym, and I just the day beforehand and saying to him, I was doing a bit of stretching, but he was going over and he was just lifting things. Like there was no sense to what he was doing. He was like exactly what you're saying. He was just walking around and he'd do a few chin-ups and then he'd just go over and he might squat something that someone else had just done up already, and then he'd just go over and just lift up 2 dumbbells. He was doing a bit of that, and I was like, TJ, you want to take it easy because the game is tomorrow. And he goes, don't worry, TJ man the match. And that was that. So that's his world he lives in, and that's what he believes every time he goes out there. Okay, so not scientific at the gym, more just like a buffet of whatever is on the go nearest to him.
This is before he had his own business, all right. But again, this is just that was his approach, and that's his mentality.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I hadn't thought of the Horgan thing. I guess that is hell of an incentive to come back. James, are you in agreement on Galan for hurler of the year?
No. Listen, he was great. He's a cast iron all-star, but I think in the earlier games, like in terms of consistency, he was excellent against Cork, obviously excellent against Clare in the Munster final, but there was no Conor Cleary, and even against Cork, the space in front of him, the ball that was going into him, certainly made his life easier. Obviously he was great against Galway, but got the break maybe for the second goal, and I don't think he had his best year. So he's in the conversation, Joe. I could understand why Kyle Hayes got it because, again, from a consistency perspective, he was really good. For me, I'm going to be totally contrarian. Dan Morrissey, because as I said, I saw, if not all of Limerick's games, maybe I probably did see all of Limerick's games. Might have had to watch one of them back or whatever. I just thought that he was Mr. Reliable, Mr. Dependable when when the ship was maybe been buffeted by heavy winds and so on. I just thought he was just a consistent, rock solid pillar. And for me, just on the basis of sheer consistency, that this guy was just an absolute colossus for Limerick all year. Even when things were going against him, I just thought he was magnificent. And he's just one of those quiet, unfussy guys you'd imagine that is just the first name on the team sheet, Mr. Dependable. And he's done that for them before. I mean, when obviously Mike Casey went out, he's the guy we put to full back. We need Kyle Hayes in the forwards, right? Dan will do the job in the wing. Mike will go to full back. You could play him, I think, anywhere in the back, and he does the job and does it in a quiet, unfussy, intelligent way. And I'd imagine he's hugely respected in the group. And I know it's not the fashionable thing to do, but for me, as I said, in terms of sheer consistency, and that's what you want your hurler of the year to be. I thought he was the player of the year, and again, it's not again to do anything on Peter Casey, but again, for me, like, Peter was brilliant in the second half, but Cian Lynch did it when Limerick really needed it in both halves, and that's why I thought that he was my pick for man of the match yesterday.
Yeah, well, look, an embarrassment of riches. So I guess the curtain comes down on another hurling season. I mean, it feels like a long time ago now since Kylie was complaining about people doing a softening up exercise on Limerick at the start of the championship and telling us we were great. It turns out people may have been right at the start of the season, but we'll talk again soon. David Herity, pleasure as always, David. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
And Jamesie, pleasure. Thanks, Jamesie.
Cheers, John. It was a great season, I think. A lot of great games. A great talking about it.
Yeah, no, it sure was. So more of the same soon. I guess we've a bit of a wait now until we go again. But thanks, fellas. We'll leave it there. And I should say hurling as well. It's anyone's game. Off the Ball has teamed up with senior hurling championship sponsors Bord Gáis Energy to uncover stories highlighting the positive impact hurling has had on people's lives. For full competition details, you can go to bordgaisenergy.ie/BGEGAA is the address.